Hello, everyone. This is Charles Coleman, team leader of Keller Williams Avenues Realty. And today let's talk about prorations. And let's talk about prorations that are paid in advance by the seller. And why this is important is because in a lot of these cases, what we're going to see is that money will actually be credited back to the seller for time they did not use. So as we go through this, the first question that I think you're going to see is something like this: homeowners fees of $112 for the quarter have been paid in advance by the seller for an August 19th closing. The entry would be. So a couple of things that we're looking at, right? We have the dollar amount. This is for the quarter. It is paid in advance. And we have a 19th of August closing. So a couple of things, right? We're going to talk about the quarter. And so the entire quarter that August 19th falls into is going to deal with July, August, and September. And there's going to be 31 days, 31 days, and 30 days. So as we go through this, right, we're going to say that we are dealing with a total of 92 days in totality for this quarter. So one of the things that we're going to do through this now is we're going to set up our timeline just for a visualization. And we are going to have July 1st, September 30th, and our closing day of August 19th. So as we're going through this, guys, in the state of Colorado, we know that the buyer owns the day of closing. So that means that there was a total of 49 days that the seller benefited, right? Because we have 31 days here in July that they benefited from, and they had 18 days inside of the month of August. So that means that the buyer will actually have this property for 13 days, right? Because we're going to count the 19th until the end of the month for the additional 31 days. So what that just told us is that the buyer has owned the property for 43 days. The buyer is benefiting 43 days in between the 19th through the 30th because the buyer owns the day of closing. So now that we have figured out all the days and these different pieces, we're going to take our $112, which is for the quarter, and we're going to divide it by the total number of days, which is 92 days. And then what we're going to do is we're going to multiply that by the 43 days that the buyer has actually used this property and is going to benefit from this property. So once we go through this, right, we take our $112 and we divide it by the 92 days, which there are 92 days in the quarter, which August 19th falls into. And then we multiply it by the 43 days that the buyer is going to use and benefit. We will get $52.35 that we will credit to the seller, and we will debit to the buyer. So the buyer is actually going to pay $52.35 back to the seller for the time that the buyer is actually going to use the property. A second question that we could be seeing is something that looks like this. Taxes of $3,250 paid in advance are prorated through the day of closing. May 10th, based on a 365-day year, the entry would be this. All right, so this one's looking a little bit different, right? So we're talking about taxes, which are typically paid in the arrears, which means that they are paid next year. And what's also interesting is that you're going to see through the day of closing, which actually means the seller is going to pay the day of closing. All right, so when you see through the day of closing, that means that the seller is actually paying for that day. So as we're going through this, this is what this one is going to look like. Let's do our our timeline. We're going to do this in a little bit different order. And we are going to say January 1st through December 31st. And we have a May 10th closing, which the seller owns. All right. The seller owns this one. So the exact same things are going to go into place. We're going to figure out how many days the actual buyer is benefiting, right? And so I'm going to slide this up, and we are talking May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. 31, 30, 31, 30, 31, 31, 30, and 21 days. 21 days because the seller actually owns the day of closing on this one. So we figured out that this is actually 235 days. 235 days is the time that the buyer owns this property and is basically using the taxes. And so from here, what we're going to do is we are going to take this $3,250 and we are going to divide this by 365 days. So $3,250 are for the year. We divide it by 365 days because that's how many days there are in a year. And that's going to give us something around $8.90. And always leave that long number in, right? Because that's going to help us determine, because it's going to push up or down from there. So that's how much it is per day. We multiply that by the 235 days that the buyer is actually going to occupy the home. And that gives us $2,092.47. We are going to credit seller, debit buyer. The buyer is going to pay for their piece. So everyone, as we're looking through this, this is how we're going to work these two problems, right? And some of the key pieces we need to know, if we're talking about quarters, we're talking about months. The advance is the one that we've been working on. So we know that in the advance pieces, we will credit the seller and we will debit the buyer as long as it is supposed to be paid in advance and it was actually paid. And the big determining one on this one right here was through. So that tells us, right, in the state of Colorado, we know that the buyer owns the day of closing, which means they pay the day of closing. And in this case, they actually said that the seller paid through the day of closing, which means that the seller owned the day of closing. Anyways, I hope that this was helpful, and I can't wait to show another problem to help you pass your real estate exam. Thank you. Have a great day.